gives me great pleasure today to welcome Josh Farley, who is a reporter for the Sun. I'm sorry, it used to be the Bremerton Sun, for the Sun, and covers the military. He has previously covered Bremerton and the criminal justice system. He is the host and creator of the weekly Beat Blast, which is a fun thing to watch, and has monthly story walks, but I think they must have been kind of postponed because of COVID. And I've asked him here today to come to talk to us about salmon in the Kitsap area. And so with great pleasure, Josh, I welcome you today.
Thank you so much, Janet. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for being here. We have a nice group of people here to talk about this. So really grateful for the opportunity. And as you can see right behind me, I'm in the offices, the newly remade offices, I should say, of the Kitsap Sun. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know that these have been incredibly turbulent times for newspapers, particularly in the country, who perform a very vital service in providing the public with information about what's going on. There are many areas that have lost their newspapers, affectionately referred to as news deserts, and we don't want to be one of those. So I would certainly put a plug out to please support your local newspaper, however, wherever you choose to do that, and at whatever level you can do that. We at the Sun have been here in Bremerton since 1935 and have covered Kitsap County for as long. And in downtown Bremerton here, our company is now the USA Today Network. We sold this building. Luckily, this is the same newsroom I've always been in, but we are now tenants in this building. So we have many other tenants now. There was 200 people when I started here at the Sun, a press humming downstairs. Unfortunately, a lot of that work has been sent to other places in sort of the corporate world here, but we have all of our local news reporters are on the ground here, including Nathan Pilling, who is our Bainbridge Island reporter. Many of you have probably seen his byline in the paper. So one of the things that I have really loved doing, thank you for mentioning, Janet, is the story walk concept, where you actually go places and actually see firsthand stories, things that are happening in your community. In fact, I helped Nathan put on a walk at the Wyckoff site. Let's see, boy, it's been 3-4 years now, I think, that we all journeyed out there. And it was a really great experience to see that cleanup, the continuing cleanup. There's more money coming for Wyckoff in this last state budget. And that effort is going to accelerate, it looks like. So very exciting there. And so at the Sun, one of the things that I have really tried to embrace is video. Is obviously not everyone reads the paper, and particularly in the younger generation. So we're turning to video as a medium to try to engage audiences and teach them about all of the great things that happen in our respective communities around Kitsap County. So with that, a local filmmaker and I, we decided to start a video series this past year called Tales of the Sound. Hopefully, I know that Reed said, I think he sent out the link. If you don't have that link, I'm happy to post that or send that to you. Janet, maybe if you have a chance, if you want to put that link into our chat, just so people can at some point watch it. So Secrets of the Salmon was our second episode. We did one episode focusing on geology. The first one was focused on geology in Green and Gold Mountain, which you can see from Bainbridge and from Kitsap. They're the tallest mountains, if you will, about 1,700 foot. I would call them maybe more hills, given our environment here in Puget Sound. That was the first episode. Second episode against salmon that we're going to delve more deeply today. The third episode is about the ballistic missile submarine fleet at Bangor and how that came to be and the history there of why we have nuclear armed submarines that patrol the waters of the Pacific Ocean and why they're based here in Kitsap. The fourth episode is not out yet, but it looks at the mosquito fleet. I was very honored to interview Ralph Monroe, the former Secretary of State, and himself, someone who grew up at Crystal Springs on Bainbridge Island, a very well-known Bainbridge Islander.
Yeah, this is Reed. I'm just going to jump in here, if you don't mind, and let people know that Ralph is actually going to be a guest of this program on Monday.
Oh, how wonderful. Well, great timing. I send Ralph my regards. He's someone that I've gotten to interview, had the fortune of interviewing quite a few times now over the years and think the world of him. It's so wonderful. I'm glad you're going to get to hear from him. So that is mosquito fleet history plus the future of the mosquito fleet. We're seeing some foot ferries. If you voted in 2016, you know that that Kitsap Transit passed a measure to establish fast ferries or non-car ferries from Kingston, Bremerton, and Southworth. And there may be more in communities like Everett and Tacoma that they may start their own ferry connections. So that's episode 4, and we're going to round out the series. I'm so pleased. We'll start production pretty soon on an episode about the history of Chief, Seattle, and the Suquamish tribe. Very excited to do that. But we're here today to talk about salmon. So I wanted to tell you, first and foremost, I'm not a marine biologist. I'm not a subject matter expert. I am a generalist for this topic. But it's one that I have covered passionately for the Kitsap Sun, and I do get to talk to many. And I just want to share some of the knowledge and information that has been imparted to me over the years. So I know also that one of the previous speakers that you had talked about salmon enhancement and recovery efforts in the state. So there's a long, complicated history about treaty rights in the Sound, but I want to mention first and foremost that we are, of course, surrounded by the what's now known as the Salish Sea, Puget Sound. You can call it that as well. They are different. Salish Sea covers the territory all the way up into British Columbia, a similar body of water, and all the way down to Olympia. Puget Sound, of course, is a more limited area here around Seattle, Bremerton, and into the south, Tacoma and Olympia area. But it's important to note that we are in the waters of the Suquamish Clearwater, of course, the people of the clear salt water, and who have been here for thousands of years. And one of the reasons, the impetus for making this video was to explain that and their history, and in the context of how essentially their fishing, their way of life has really been impeded by all of the growth and development that have happened here over the course of about the last 150 years or so. So, I mean, if you want to go back to development in Kitsap County in particular, I would probably take you back to 1853 or so. Of course, we could go further to George Vancouver coming in, sailing in, and the Charles Wilkes expedition. Of course, Wilkes has an elementary school named for him on Bainbridge. He came in 1841 and explored, named lots of things here in our Puget Sound. But in 1853, there was a mill built at Port Gamble. Then subsequently, there was a mill at Enitai, which is near Bremerton, and of course, Port Blakely. And so with that development, of course, came obviously lots of impacts on the environment. So we're going back that far. It's important because I think in terms of salmon, and almost immediately when you're talking about hauling not only heavy equipment, but just moving people around, yes, there was the mosquito fleet, but the development of roads certainly started to make a pretty immediate impact. One thing that I'm writing about currently that you'll read in Sunday's Kitsap Sun is about people who flock out to Seebeck to watch the bald eagles. They go out to, if you've ever been out there, to Big Beef Creek. Big Beef Creek is actually one of the creeks that's mentioned in our video. It's one of the most productive coho streams. The University of Washington maintains a monitoring station there. They count coho or silver salmon as they come through Hood Canal and make their journey into Big Beef Creek. But lots and lots of people watching eagles near a causeway that was put over the top of basically it runs right over Big Beef Creek. Now it's fairly open as far as the water access, the channel coming in. But what we found in terms of science in recent years and decades is that anytime you take a stream and you stuff it into a culvert, because that's essentially what they did starting in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, you're pretty much bottlenecking salmon and other species that use those creeks as their lifeblood of traversing up and down, and none more important than the salmon. a so-called anadromous species, because anybody know what anadromous means? Want to tell us what anadromous means? Okay. Anadromous is a very fancy word of saying that it is a species that can traverse from freshwater to saltwater and back again. So that's one of the remarkable things about salmon, is they endure this multi-year journey where they they start out in creeks, rivers. I did actually want to make a real quick point about the fact that most in Kitsap County, because we do not have mountains, we do not have rivers, we have streams and creeks because mostly we have hills. So basically they make this journey, they go all the way out to the ocean, they migrate, they serve, of course, as food for orcas, and I'd love to talk more about that. They perform an incredible function in the buffet of life that is here. They don't just taste good for us humans to eat, but they're critical. They're called a keystone species for a reason, because they touch so many parts of the ecosystem. So not only because of their importance, but because of tribal treaty rights and because of some of the court decisions that have occurred, the state and the county and any jurisdiction has been ruled by a federal court's decision an obligation to remove what I talked about earlier, those culverts and those things that block fish passage from occurring. So causeways, things where, again, early settlers might have come in, they just slapped down a couple of pipes to keep the creek flowing through somehow, and then of course just a bunch of mud and rocks material over the top so they could be driven over, essentially, is what in layman's terms, to my understanding, again. And what that, of course, made in terms of the environmental impact is that to be a migrating salmon, a salmon going back to spawn to deliver the next generation, it from what I've learned from marine biologists at the Squamish Tribe and at the state Department of Fish and Wildlife, is that that's a pretty jarring experience if instead of a natural meandering creek going, traveling to and from, and again, remembering that you're going from freshwater to saltwater and then back again, that's a jarring experience for salmon. Not all of them can make that. And because of that harsh transition, you're going from, again, something that was a very natural, the freshwater meeting the saltwater, in a much more, I guess you could say, a slower transition to something that's much more intense. So for instance, like on Chico Creek here, in the biggest times of stream flow, let's say in fall when the rains are really intense, you have a huge amount of water coming through those culverts, almost like a fire hose coming out as the rains come down. Well, it makes it really hard for a salmon to make it back up to its spawning grounds, and so it's really problematic. So in a lot of places, that obviously those culverts are being taken out. All over Kitsap County you can find this. None bigger, and I would posit more important than the Chico Creek watershed. If you spend any time in that area, it's absolutely beautiful. There are lots of streams. We're not just talking about Chico Creek. We're talking about an area actually that goes, I wonder if I could share my screen and just show people what it looks like. Okay, so you see Bainbridge Island there. So we're going to take our journey from Bainbridge and we're going to head westward across what's known as Port Orchard Bay. I know it's always kind of funny. Port Orchard's actually down here. Long story of why that happened, but this was originally Port Orchard Bay, and the name stuck there. So we're going to keep going across this peninsula here. Point Heron. Here's the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. We're heading up into Dyes Inlet. Dyes was the taxidermist on the Wilkes expedition. Little known fact. That's why he gets the credit for that name. So we're going to focus in right here on this little area. As you can see, this is a massive estuary, and I'm not going to even try to explain to you the importance of estuaries, but I view them kind of like lungs in Puget Sound. They serve a huge importance for all kinds of sea life. They're where our forests essentially meet with a unique ecosystem all of itself. Forest meets the sea. And as you can see, there's a big creek right here. This is Chico Creek. And right under here, you have some. These are box culverts, 2 of them that stuff this entire estuary. All has to run under here. And believe it or not, there are tons of chum salmon, mostly chum, that still make this journey remarkably. They get up here to the point where you can, if you watch the video, you can literally almost walk across salmon. But here's where this creek continues along. It continues to meander all the way. It goes under Erlin's Point Road right here as well. It continues, goes through a golf course area. And then here's Golf Club Hill Road. Now the county, at a cost of about $5 million, in conjunction with the Suquamish tribe, recently took out the culvert here, which is also talked about in our video. This was very impactful, and several other culverts have also been taken out up above on Chico Creek. And Chico Creek has many tributaries. I want to mention them really quickly. You might have heard of them. There's Lost Creek, there's Chico Creek, there's Dickerson Creek, Kitsap Creek as well, and they form a huge, network of small streams here that all have salmon spawning habitat. So, and look at all the development here, right over the top of what is really a magnificent. Here's the Dickerson Creek waterfall. You can actually go see that. It's beautiful. It's at the Uland Tree Farm. I'd highly recommend a trip out there sometime. It's absolutely stunning to watch that. But look at all the creeks, and they all go through this huge, a number of developments. But look at where you can see the outlines of the stream. They continue all the way out to Klahowya Secondary School. If you're familiar, it's one of the 3 high schools in the Central Kitsap School District system. And I'll keep heading out so you can see. There's Wildcat Creek as well that forms Wildcat Creek, and then also Kitsap Lake is Kitsap Creek, which runs along here. So you can see we're talking about a really impressive amount of spawning habitat, and all of it, if you think about this, every single one of those streams, all that rain that comes into the Green and Gold Mountain area, Green and Gold Mountain are right down here. All of that converges at Chico Creek, all through this little area, all by this the Kitsap Golf and Country Club golf course underneath here, and then again 2, I think they're 8-foot culverts. They all get stuffed through here. So in the state and the county and Suquamish tribe's eyes, there's great value of doing something about this, because so much restoration work has occurred in the upper portions of the streams that maybe it's about time now to go ahead and tackle the big kahuna, I would call it, and that is what, in fact, what's happening. And so the state is pushing forward. Here's where you gulp a little bit. The project is going, because it's a freeway, essentially, it's a highway, 2 lanes in each direction over Chico Creek. This is not going to be a cheap project to do. It's going to cost almost $60 million, $58.3 million. The state, though, with the obligation, the federal court order to take out, they think that the biggest bang for their buck in helping that overall ecosystem is going to be taking out those culverts. So that's the plan. In next year, they have, it's actually a really interesting project in what they're going to do. They're essentially going to take that section of creek. They are going to build a bridge. It's about 200 feet long. They're going to form a new channel, a brand new channel that will actually divert where the creek is now, and then build that new bridge. As they're doing this, they're not going to ever close Highway 3. Highway 3 drivers they'll build the bridge in the central portion, which is in the median first, to get rid of all the fill, and then they'll detour people once they are done with the center portion. They'll do the outer portion. They'll do this all, and somehow, basically fly the plane as they're building a new one. I don't know how it's pretty amazing engineering that they can do that, but that's the plan. And once they've done that, they will be left with what they hope will be a much healthier stream, a robust creek that flows into or does not flow, excuse me, a creek that has many other creeks flow into it. And so they're hoping that the impact of that will bring the salmon runs back in much more robust numbers than what we even have now. And I wanted to quickly mention that one of course, the food chain is long and varied, but one at the very top of the food chain that is worth mentioning here is, of course, the orcas, particularly the southern resident orca whales. There's only around 70 of those left. And the state, of course, and others in the environmental community are very much hoping that these culvert projects help in terms of, because orcas, southern resident orcas, that's what they do. They follow salmon around. And the hope is at Erlin's Point, particularly, and at Chico Creek, where this all begins. I might mention that several times over the years that I've been here, particularly a visit in, I believe it was 2007, orca whales from the southern residents actually came into Bremerton under the Minette Bridge, if you might remember that. It was a very special occasion. It's actually been immortalized at one of our Bremerton parks, Lions Park. They've made statues of the orcas visit back then. It was a really magical time, and they came guess where they went? They went all the way up to Chico Creek right here, which explains again, it adds further evidence that they were chasing salmon. They were eating salmon all the way into one of our most wonderful nooks and crannies here in Puget Sound.
I don't think, Josh, that it was in 2007. I think it was before that when the orcas came into Dias Inlet. I think it was the late 1990s, or it might have been the early 2000s. I don't know if you have the date on that, but anyway, they came in full force, definitely under Minette Bridge, and over and around into Dias Inlet. So there's a whole bunch of us out there. I'm in this little tiny boat, a little fishing dory, and we have to be so many thousand feet or 100 feet away from them, and they're doing their dances, and they're just going, they're having the best time in their life, and we are enjoying it thoroughly, obviously.
Yeah.
And so we stopped, so we were away from them. All of a sudden they did a 90-degree turn, and they literally came underneath our boat. Wow. Now, take into consideration, this is a small, maybe 5 people total in that boat, could be in that boat. So it's a little tiny boat, came down under. I got wet with the flow. It was the most extraordinary experience in my life, or one of them anyway. And I will never forget. I never forget her coming down, or him coming down and underneath the boat. And, he could have just done this and the boat would have gone like that.
You're right. It was in 1997 that the biggest visit. There have been subsequent visits, but nothing on par with what happened in 97. I believe, the fall of 97, which that's when the salmon migrations are. They were, of course, following those. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's this incredible interconnectivity that I just love. I love being out in the woods and seeing that, particularly along the streams. One of the reasons I wanted to do the Tales of the Sound on salmon and kind of unveiling their secrets is, you can literally take the impact of salmon so far up to the top of the mountains, where you have bears that are eating the salmon on the side of these creeks or in the creeks. And of course, eventually Mother Nature takes its course, and the salmon contain this unique nitrogen isotope that scientists have traced into Douglas fir and other conifers at very high elevations. And guess what? It's from the poop from those bears that they literally bring. I'm not kidding. I'm not making this up. It's like, I can't remember which isotope it is, but it's a nitrogen isotope. So you're literally going from a salmon in the stream all the way up to the tops of mountains. And the salmon are making their impact. All like that, it goes to that elevation. Incredible.
So Josh, what is the most prevalent salmon species in the Sound right now?
Good question. Well, I can only speak for here, and I would certainly say it's the chum or dog salmon, definitely. We have in large part because of the runs we have at Chico. But we do tend to get a lot of chum. As I mentioned, out on Hood Canal, there tends to be more coho. There have been quite a bit of restoration efforts out there as well. And one of the other restoration projects that we talk about is the $12 million causeway that was taken off of between Indian Island and Marrowstone Island. There used to be a big causeway that opened up a bunch of habitat for what they're thinking are there's a lot of coho and other types of salmon too. But those are the big ones. We of course also have Chinook and pink runs as well, and sockeye. So we get them all. But I would, if I, again, not being a subject matter expert here, if we had one on, I think they would say our most prolific right now are probably chum.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? But I remember watching New Yorkers in Dyes Inlet sitting outside at Anthony's in Bremerton. It was just phenomenal, just sitting there watching them play in the water.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't it fun though?
Yes, it's not quite your experience.
Playing with it on the tail. Yeah. Oh God, unbelievable, unbelievable.
Yeah, and of course we get visits from, we have gray whales that come in, the big Zorcas as well, not the southern residents, but the big Zorcas. They're mammal eating, and we see those in our local waters too. But yeah, and it's just amazing to watch. I mean, the southern residents. I mean, it's just so precarious, but they're almost like, I feel like they're members of our family in some ways. The way that, you know, we if you followed a few years ago, the mother that held her dead calf, you know,
Yes.
for days on end. Just, you know, there's something that that they truly tug at our heartstrings.
I'm going to say thank you for joining us today. It was really instructive, and I will make a pilgrimage to go and see what's happening at Chico Creek, because it's really quite, because we're on Bainbridge, we very seldom look to see what's happening in the rest of Kitsap County. And it would do us good to go on a day trip and see